Yes, it is, ladies and gentlemen. Father Hines and his great band playing for you from the new Grand Terrace on Chicago's Great South Side.
Good morning, everybody.
Of Super Jive in the Father Hines style. Yeah. What could this be? It's a Limehouse Blues.
Morning, Susie. Hey, everybody. Hey, Gladys. Morning, Tashera and Emily and Tricia. And hey, Marla. Morning, Kurt and Bart and Ava. Morning, Kathleen, Bob, Mary, Tony, Karen, and Susan. Hey, Andrea. Hey, David. Hey, Nikki. Hey, Patty. Hey, Larry. Morning, Octavio. Hey, Mom. It's about sunny and 60s here in Chicago. Hey, Kirk. Hey, Jenna. Hey, Dina. Hey, Wendy, Dave, and Barb. Hey, Carol. And Kathy in Arkansas. Hey, James over on YouTube. Morning, Janice. Hey, Debbie. Nikki, glad to have you even for a little bit. Hey, Carol. Hey, Amy. Hey, Becky. All's well over here. Hey, Lisa. Hey, Lisa, congrats on the new grandbaby. Hey, Karen and Jerry and Martin and Susan. Hey, Florisita. And Nancy. Hey, Martin. Hey, Kyle, Sarah. Hey, John. Hey, Stephanie. Kyle in Fort Worth. Hold the fort for what it's worth. Hey, Lorena. Hey, Kyle. Thanks, Kyle. Bob, if I'm not working, what am I doing? Gives me time to take my mind off everything else. Hey, Bridget. Hey, Judy. Oh, yeah, I did want to show this. This is Charlotte listening to me explain who each Star Wars character is. She would listen to that for a long time when she was little. Hey, Rosemary. Hey, Libby. Hey, Jay. Hey, Judy and Bridget and Daryl and Rosemary. Hey, Marjorie. Thanks, Patrice. Hope you enjoy it.
That's what you call a powerhouse coda. Yeah, Earl Father Hines carries on now and presents Leroy Harris to sing Teacher's Pet.
Good morning, Libby. Good morning, all the Mysterians. Thanks for all the kind messages the last couple of days. And I'll show a couple of Charlotte clips at the end of this tour. Morning, Jordana. Hey, Belinda. Hey, Aaron. Hey, Barbara. Morning all around. Octavio, that's right. Hey, Larry. Hey, Jean. Hey, Lori. Morning, Bella. And Bridget, I can imagine Miles fighting me for a McGriddle. Charlotte would have just waited eagerly. Miles, if you want something I'm eating, he'll come right up on me. Hey, Todd on YouTube. Hey, Vicky. And happy birthday to Benny Goodman. Hey, Regan. Good morning all around. Morning, Lisa in Kansas. Hey, Randall. Morning, Dina. Hey, Ann. Alright, shut the mail program down. And shutting Twitter down to no alerts there either. Hey, Brian and Urbana. Hey, Mike. Hey, Kathy. Morning, Gary. Hey, Adana. Hey, Olange. Morning, Shara. Thank you very much. Appreciated all the condolences the last couple of days. Morning, Lynn. Hey, Luann. One second here. I'm going to try to hack this up once and for all. Alright, occasionally I have a tour where I'm just hacking up the same gunk over and over as there's no place to gracefully spit. Sharon, Miles is doing alright. Miles has known what's going on for a while. Hey, Dad. Yeah, Lynn, I'm afraid so. It was time. We had somebody who was able to come here to take care of things. And she was ready. But I'm here to work today, so I took yesterday off. Hey, Gene. Hey, Sue. Hey, Rodney. Hey, Gail. Miles is asleep on the bed with Ronnie right now. But he's already been up and playing and climbing on stuff today. Hey, Linda. Thank you, Heidi and Bucky. And thanks to so many of you who made donations to pause the shelter where we got her in her name yesterday. That was so nice of you. Morning, Geraldine. Hey, Kelly. Thanks, Larry. Hey, Bob. Hope you enjoy it. Thanks, Karen. This is only the second time I've done the Gold Coast tour, but I really enjoyed it last time. I changed it up just slightly since. Added in some stuff people asked for and some new material. Because some things change over the... You know, it's an ancient neighborhood, but things do change over the course of the 3 months since I last did it. Morning, Connie in Southwest Michigan. Morning, Maureen. Thanks, Ellen. I'll show some Charlotte clips at the end of the tour. Ronnie's sad, of course. We've also got other things to look forward to right now. Morning, Jackie. Thank you, Melissa. Good morning, Rosita. More Lenora. We'll be seeing Lenora soon. Bridget, no, I didn't hear about that yet. Oh, Geraldine, I know those high rises where the old Palmer Mansion was. Hey, Yvette. It comes up now and then on the Leopold and Loeb tour. When Nathan Leopold got out of jail, he spent his first night out of prison in that high-rise. And last time he had gone by that space, the Palmer Castle was there. Thank you, Candace. Good morning, Melissa. Morning, Kathy. Alright, we'll give Earl Father Hines a couple more minutes before we get started here this morning. Yeah, we'd lost a couple others in recent years, but they were both 18 years old, so we were more prepared for it than with Charlotte. Morning, Pam. Everybody, we're giving Earl Father Hines a couple more minutes before we get started here. Morning, Diane. Thanks, Olivia and Georgie. There are many cities have a Gold Coast. It's a very common name to call the ritzy area. Nikki, yep, I did a handful of episodes of that show. Hey, Audrey. Bob, not right away. We haven't really talked about it too much, but I'm sure we'll get another cat in a few months. Just not right away. Morning, Nanette. We both got some travel coming up. We thought we'd wait till we finished all of that. Morning, Nancy. We'll give Earl Father Hines just a couple of minutes to play before we get started. Dead Ringer Toast Slingers, I like that. The Dead Ringer Toast Slinger. James, yes I have. Every now and then I do a Leopold and Loeb tour. Laura, we're hoping not. The office she set up for herself is much more efficient than the office she ever actually worked in.
Well, we're about half.
But all right.
Live concert by Earl Father Hines and his orchestra, so now it can be told it's reaching you from...
Earl Hines has reached a stopping place, so I think it is time that we go ahead and get started. Welcome along, everybody. I'm Adam Seltzer from Mysterious Chicago Tours. I've been a tour guide and historian here in Chicago for over 15 years now. I've got about a dozen Chicago history books out, including Mysterious Chicago, the book, a novel all about this stuff called Just Kill Me, which is about a ghost tour guide who makes places more haunted by killing people at them, and The Smart Aleck's Guide to American History, a 2009 book for which I actually just got a royalty check, which is fairly unusual for me. I want to take a quick minute before we get started to say thanks to everybody who expressed condolences for our little kitty Charlotte. Here she is a few years ago as just a little girl listening to me explain who each Star Wars figure was. She would listen and listen and listen to that kind of stuff. But all right, so about a year ago, we were unable to do walking tours. We're working on getting the in-person ones back up and going, but I'm still waiting on some paperwork to clear down at City Hall. But in the meantime, we're going to continue doing the virtual tours that we started up about a year ago. And it's a kind of a cool thing because I can cover ground and do things in virtual tours that I couldn't really do in person. I'm not really sure how I could do a really good virtual tour of the a regular tour of the Gold Coast, just because to have enough people, we're in a residential area. It would be kind of hard to get people around, kind of hard not to bother the people in their houses. But for those who may not know, the Gold Coast is a fancier neighborhood in Chicago. It's gone in and out of being fancy. After the Great Depression, a lot of the great mansions were broken up into single-room occupancy apartments and artist studios. It had a very bohemian vibe for a while. Now it's mostly back up to being ritzy. But see, here's the Chicago Loop, the main downtown area. And we will zoom in here a bit to see where the Gold Coast is. Just above the river, you get past the magnificent mile in Streeterville. Then a couple of blocks beyond that, you find yourself in the Gold Coast just above Division Street. So the approximate route will be taken today. We will start out on Lakeshore Drive, make our way west, then north, then west, then starting back over east, back onto Lakeshore, kind of in a strange pattern. This is a little more walking than most people would really want to do on a regular walking tour, but with virtual, it's no trouble at all. So let's go ahead and get started over here on Lakeshore Drive. Oh, I'm in the wrong clips up there. That's one too. All right, now we've got it right. We're going to start right here at 1250 Lakeshore Drive, a building you might see when you're driving past on Lakeshore. This big palatial-looking mansion in the style known as Richardsonian Romanesque. It's the style of architecture popularized by Henry Hobson Richardson. This one is actually by a guy named Frank Abbott, built in 1890 for a rich guy by the name of Charles Hyson. Frank Abbott also built the old cold storage warehouse that is now some lofts over on the Chicago River. But this place was built for Carl Hyson. His son, Carl Hyson Jr., was a matinee idol, married a woman named Dorothy Dixon, who was a silent film actress, but also a singer. Her best-known piece is probably Look for the Silver Lining. Then their daughter Dorothy Hyson became an actress as well in a few movies. I could only find a couple of clips of her, but there's one of them that really shows just the kind of elegant high society parties they used to throw inside of this place.
So much
That's her being sung to.
There's so much I'm wanting to say. There's so much.
It's not a great song, but if you play it a few times putting a tour together, it will get stuck in your head. I will spare you guys that, and we'll move on just down the block a little ways to a really, really interesting place. It's usually covered in trees and leaves out front, so you don't get that great of a view of it unless you're really paying attention going down Lakeshore. But it's this really fascinating building designed by the architects Huldebert and Roche, who are best known for pioneering the Chicago School of Architecture here in Chicago. But in this case, they designed it, but really they kind of copied it. It is based on a place in Venice that was known as Desdemona's Palace. Supposedly the place where the historical Desdemona, who appears in the play Othello, lived. And it was known as Desdemona's Palace even in Chicago 100 years ago, from the very first. But after originally being built way back in the day, in the 1920s it came into possession of a guy by the name of Edgar Leffensberger. Now, Edward Leffensberger in the late 1920s, early 1930s ran a club called the 225 Club on East Superior Street, right where the Children's Hospital is now, across from the Museum of Contemporary Art. You can see they've got it advertised here as being 70 degrees cool with modern air conditioning techniques. Now, this was a jazz and dancing club, probably also an illegal drinking club, and if you owned a club like that in the late 1920s and early 1930s, there's a pretty good chance you were going to have to deal with mobster guys. And he was actually in partnership with Frank the Enforcer Nitti, who we'll cover a bit more next week on the Gangsters of Chicago tour. But after Prohibition ended, the gangs and Capone was in prison, the gangsters needed new ways to make money. One thing they hit on was stealing bonds from the mail and then selling stolen bonds. That was kind of tricky. It's hard to get rid of a stolen bond. So the idea is they stole $500,000 worth of bonds out of the mail. They came to Edgar Leffensberger and said, hey, you got all these high rollers coming into your club. You are going to sell them these bonds. Trouble is they got caught fairly quickly. Nitti was just not as good at these kind of things as Capone had been. So Edgar Leffensberger was indicted in court. But when they came to find him, to tell him he'd been indicted for robbery, they found him lying dead inside of this mansion, wearing a robe with a cigarette next to him and a half glass of whiskey next to his hand. Now, the official story was that it was a suicide, and they examined it very, very carefully to see if it was really a suicide, all the ballistics they could do at the time. The family story, the one that went around, is a couple of guys from the mob, Nitti and people like that, showed up in the place and said, all right, here's what's going to happen now. You're about to get indicted. We don't want you squealing. The obvious thing we could do here is we could kill you and then your wife. If you don't want us to kill your wife too, what you're going to do is have a glass of whiskey, have a cigarette, and shoot yourself. Which is probably fairly close to what actually happened. It's impossible to know for sure, of course. But that was one of the bigger stories of Chicago in the early 1930s that's kind of fallen out of favor now. Nobody ever really talks about the $500,000 mail bond robbery anymore. But let's loop around a little bit. So we're going to move a little bit east onto Astor Street now. And just down the block here is this terrific single building that's really 3 townhouses. And this was designed by the architects Burnham and Root, a couple of the most important architects in Chicago history. Daniel Burnham famously said, make no little plans. They have no magic in them to stir men's blood, and probably themselves will not be realized. Make big plans, aim high, and hope end in work. Now, this was not only designed by Burnham and Root, but Root lived in the middle one just briefly before his untimely death. Now, his funeral was held here as well. After John Root's death, his sister-in-law, Harriet Monroe, moved into the place. She was the founder and editor of Poetry magazine, and kind of turned this place almost into a bit of a literary salon. In fact, in 1902, she hosted an author by the name of Mary MacLane here. And it was almost like Beatlemania, but Mary MacLane had written a book called I Await the Coming of the Devil's Coming. This was a really, really authentic and raw set of essays and diary entries by a teenage girl in Butte, Montana. And it was a sensation when it was published, because it really is a very good book. It's kind of got a cult following now. So in it, she talks about things like being in love with other women, which in 1902 was a shocking thing for a girl to talk about. But there was her visit here to this house was covered by sketch artists. She was greeted by people screaming at the train. I'll read just a little bit of an excerpt of, there's a section where she writes, "From the soft, persistent, maddening glances of water cart drivers, kind devil, deliver me. From insipid sweet wine, from men who wear mustaches, from the sort of people that call legs limbs, kind devil, deliver me. From unripe bananas, from batless people, kind devil, deliver me. From soft old bachelors and soft old widowers, from agonizing elocutionists who recite, the lips that touch liquor shall never touch mine, kind devil, deliver me. From people who persist in calling my good body mere vile clay. From fools who tell me that what I want to do, kind devil, deliver me. From a nice young man, from tin spoons, from popular songs, kind devil, deliver me." So the kind of rawness from a teenage girl that people were not used to seeing at all, let alone so eloquently. Could almost say she's like the Olivia Rodrigo of 1902. And just recently, right around the corner from this on Bank Street, this is pretty cool, they tore up Bank Street recently. And underneath the asphalt, they found the wooden paver blocks that they tried to use briefly in the late 19th, early 20th century. These are wooden blocks. They're cedar-coated with creosote. They smell like the city. There's a few wooden alleys still extant in Chicago. This one had been buried all of this time. But it's really cool to see right now. We went there for the morning mini tour just the other day. And here you can see they're kind of paved in such a way that it curves around. So you can definitely tell the difference between how this would look from like the cobblestones or the bricks. You got to look really closely to see that it's wood. You know, they're covered in creosote, so they kind of look like they're just stone or brick. But nope, these are made out of wood. Really cool to see. Now, speaking of Beatlemania, we're going to go just a little bit south of the John Wilborn Root House, where Mary MacLane experienced something like a 1902 version of Beatlemania, and see a scene of actual Beatlemania here at the Astor House Apartments. The Astor Towers. It was originally the Astor Hotel, designed by Bertrand Goldberg, who is famously quoted as saying that there are no square corners in nature, so there shouldn't be any in architecture either. He designed things like Marina City, seen here. But certainly he has a lot of square corners and right angles here at the Astor Hotel. But we'll go back to 1966. Over in England, John Lennon had given an interview called How Does a Beatle Live? John Lennon Lives Like This, and in it, John just kind of talks like John Lennon talked, and at one point said something about how Christianity will fade away. I'm right and I'll be proven right. We're probably bigger than Jesus right now. Which didn't raise any eyebrows at all in England. The decline of Christianity in England had been a major dinner discussion point for 50 years by then, ever since the end of World War I. But once that got reprinted in the United States, people all over the Bible Belt decided to cancel the Beatles. Their public radio stations publicly vowed they would never play one of their songs again. Public burnings of Beatle albums were held. So, as their 1966 tour of the United States began, they held a press conference right here at the Astor Hotel, of which we actually have some footage here. This is great. Here we've got the screaming fans hanging right outside. Authentic glimpse of Beatlemania.
If it had said television is more popular than Jesus, I might have got away with it. But I'm not saying that we're better or greater or comparing us with Jesus Christ as a person or God as a thing or whatever it is. You know, I just said what I said and it was wrong or was taken wrong, and now it's all this.
How do you feel about the record burnings here in the United States?
Well, I think, you know, that it's a bit silly. It seems a bit like a publicity stunt on their part, you know.
That's about what I think, too, is a publicity stunt on their part. So that all had happened right here at the Astor Hotel. And I'll swing right around from there a bit. Just briefly, we're going to take a look at a couple of really cool houses here on Goethe Street. These houses, the architect is apparently unknown. It's not listed in the Chicago Preservation Society's landmark listings or anything here. But condos in these places come up on the market now and then. They've been totally rehabbed on the inside, I believe. They go for about $500,000 each. Which is honestly less than I would have thought. But if we swing around from those, right next to the Astor Towers is another hotel with a lot of rock star connections. This is the Ambassador East Hotel. Now known as the Omni Ambassador East, I believe. And right up on the door, they have pictures of people who'd stayed there, such as David Bowie sitting there pretending to pray, Marilyn Monroe talking on the phone there. But of course, this being Mysterious Chicago, we got to throw in at least one gruesome story from around here. Guy by the name of J.B. Pauley, a coal executive, checked into this place in 1929 with his wife. Next anyone heard is when they came into the place and found his wife was sitting dead in the armchair, and he was lying dead nearby. There had been a murder-suicide. And they went into a remarkable amount of detail about this. They didn't go so far as to publish, like, a picture of the crime scene, but frankly, I'm kind of surprised. They did have a very detailed diagram here. It was eventually determined that the issue had been temporary insanity, which is something you see quite a lot in these murder-suicide cases. The guy is dead, there's no way left to prosecute him or anything. Honestly, just the easiest thing to do is decide it had been something like temporary insanity. Now, right around the corner from it, on the other side, is the pump room. And incidentally, while we're talking about rock stars in this hotel, I do know that Bob Dylan is known to stay at this hotel when he's in Chicago. Don't ask me how I know. But the Pump Room was a famous place going way back as a bar, way back to the 1940s and 50s. Everybody who was anybody hung out there. As of 1952, New Year's Eve dinner cost $15.56 a person, which was pretty good money at the time. Most famously, there was Booth 1, which at the time had its own telephone, which in the 1950s was a pretty big deal. And it was said that every celebrity knew what the number for that telephone was. So people who got the honor of sitting there would often get phone calls. It was usually reserved for celebrities. Like here's Phyllis Diller talking on the phone at booth 1. Liza Minnelli and her mother Judy Garland sitting there at booth 1. Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. Now, at one point in the pump room, in fact, Phil Collins showed up, tried to get in, but he wasn't wearing a jacket. They had a pretty strict jacket policy at the time, so he had to go and borrow one. Later, that inspired him to call his album No Jacket Required. But while we're talking about this building, underneath it, when they were digging out the basement for this place back in the 1920s, that was the last time anybody saw the old tunnels that were underneath the Gold Coast back in the 1850s, before the Gold Coast was really here. But before the Gold Coast was here, there was a brewery run by a guy by the name of John Huck. John Huck had a whole mile or so of old brick tunnels that were underneath the Gold Coast, just down low enough to keep things cool in the summertime so he could age his beer during hot weather. So exactly what the scope of these was is not really known anymore. The people who built the Ambassador Hotel remember that they had the devil's own time with the basement because they kept running into the tunnels, and the tunnels are presumably still there. It's very difficult to get rid of a tunnel. But in the late 19th and early 20th century, it was kind of a rite of passage for Chicago kids to go running around playing in the old Huck tunnels, playing cops and robbers. Their parents got nervous that there might really be robbers inside of the place and had all of the entrances blocked off. We got here cave-hide boys who rob and run. And there was a place, the Plamondon Mansion was robbed, and they found a lot of their stuff strewn about the tunnels later on. So everything's been blocked off now. John Huck survives only as a grave marker at Graceland Cemetery. His son has a whole big mausoleum that he's not actually in. And I keep hoping somebody's going to accidentally find an entrance to those tunnels, because they're presumably still there. Just nobody really took a good record of where they were to begin with. So one day they'll be digging out a tunnel, they'll find something. Or at least they'll find more wooden paving blocks. And more rock and roll news, just up the road from the Ambassador, just across the street and a little bit further north, was this mansion originally built for George Isham, the surgeon, but then eventually in the 1930s it was broken up into apartments and residences until finally being sold for about $40,000 to the Playboy Company. The Playboy Company was operating out of the Palmolive building down in the Magnificent Mile at the time, and this became the first Playboy Mansion. There's some terrific features of it. Down in the basement was a terrific pool with a grotto hidden by a waterfall. The pool also had a window that people could see inside of. It was something they talked about a lot. Playboy in the 50s would have all these articles about our dream townhouse or the Playboy bachelor pad. Fantastic mid-century design. This was back when Playboy was mostly like literary criticism, jazz reviews, like one page of PG-13 pictures. But quite a number of people hung out here. You know, back when Isham ran the place, Teddy Roosevelt came here. When it was the Playboy Mansion, people like Sammy Davis Jr. were always popping in. Shel Silverstein basically lived in the place. That's him with the guitar. Shel is best remembered now for The Giving Tree, Where the Sidewalk Ends, and A Light in the Attic. He also wrote rock songs such as A Boy Named Sue, Cover of the Rolling Stone, and a few really adult ones like Freakin' at the Freakers Ball, which are not really suitable for a morning tour. But just the next street over and a little ways down, I didn't include this on the first one, but so many people asked about it. There's this really cool house at 1243 Dearborn. And a couple of doors down is a house where Ernest Hemingway briefly lived in Chicago. After his honeymoon in the early 1920s, Hemingway and his wife moved into this place at 1239. Now, I understand the owner now has a whole little diorama of Hemingway memorabilia on the inside of the place. He was only there about 4 months. But we'll move a little bit further up north on Dearborn here. See a particularly cool building. It just stands out so much from everything else. It's the kind of place I wish there were a lot better stories about. But you can see this one here, what they call the Moorish design. That kind of Middle Eastern vibe. But this is known as the Montagna Flats. Named after the original owner, Lucius Montagna, built 1887 by an architect named Kurt Gottig, who is not known for anything else. Lucius Montagna himself, and here's another front view of it. Montagna himself was a shoe salesman, but obviously a very successful shoe salesman. And just down the block from that is the house of a guy by the name of Augustus Warner. There's an old view of it before it was rehabbed recently. But this one was designed by Lawrence Hallberg, who designed quite a number of houses around here. What he's best known for in Chicago, he's not really that well remembered, but he did design one building that's on almost every architectural boat tour. Right on the river is this building, the old Chase Sanborn Coffee Warehouse. It now says the Chicago School on it, which is actually like a psychiatry school, but it's also the best example you see on the Chicago River of the Chicago School of Architecture. Buildings from the late 19th, early 20th century, cleaner lines than you would see in earlier Beaux-Arts style buildings, and often like this one divided into threes. They call this tripartite design. There's a base, a shaft, and a capital, just like an old Roman column. Move over to Schiller here. I absolutely love this building. 1401 North Dearborn. This is designed by an architect named Asa Lyon, who also is not really known for much else, though he did build a lot of stuff in Evanston. Built by a guy named for a guy named Luther McConnell, who was the credit manager at Marshall Field. A lot of the early meetings about starting the Whole House organization were held in this house. I just want to show a couple of larger pictures of it. There's just so many cool details of it, like this the inlay here, the griffin carved into it. That's just absolutely fantastic. Then there's also another entrance over on the Schiller Street side. See how far I can move this one over. Not very. But that entrance has this stained glass portrait. It doesn't say who it is, but it is in fact Anton Schiller, the German composer and the namesake of this street. Now this has shown up in a movie. Before it was rehabbed and redone, it was painted white for a while. And the side entrance was the entrance to Chez Louise, the Italian restaurant that they sneak into by pretending they're Abe Froman in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Now, until just recently, and the day that I did this the last time, this was owned by Richard Dreyhouse, who is better known for his house houses up in the suburbs, but he owned historical properties like this all over. He passed away just a couple of months ago on the day that I was doing this tour talking about him. And Chris Farrell, who you might have seen on the Time Travel Pub Crawl the other night, said he played folk music shows at a couple of his functions over the years. He described Driehaus as like being like just a giant kid. He's the kind of guy who throws himself a 70th birthday party with a James Bond theme. Everybody who met this guy loved him, in contrast to a lot of other billionaires in the world. And speaking of people that are less loved, just up the road a little bit at 1528 North Dearborn. Let's move over to the side here just to admire some of the architecture as we go. So many cool Gothic touches in these old buildings. But this yellow brick one was the home of a woman by the name of Carolyn Corbin. Now, in a lot of our tours, we feature prominent suffragettes, people who were fighting for women to get the right to vote. Carolyn Corbin was the head of the anti-suffrage groups who fought against women getting the right to vote. And she was known to say in speeches that among the suffragettes are some very fine people, but they haven't thought this sort of thing all the way through. One particular quote she has here is, "The American people will never have any sympathy with a doctrine that leads to promiscuous prostitution as a substitute for the family, and that would abolish the Christian home and set up a code of social morals by the side of which Mormon polygamy and Mohammedan harem are commendable and altogether virtuous. Should such a calamity ever occur as the success of socialism, the last of its confiscations will be the home, and after that, chaos." Not unlike the kind of speeches you occasionally hear today from the same people who are trying to make it harder and harder to vote. But right around from here, a little more famously, we just talked about the wooden alley that was uncovered, which I'm sure they're just going to pave back over with blacktop. After all, not all of the wooden bricks are still there. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's snagged a couple to use as bookends. And actually, they smell great. They smell like the city. But over here is the Cardinals Mansion, designed in 1885 by James Willett. It was the home of 8 archbishops of the Chicago area. Today, the current cardinal doesn't live there. It's kind of become the fashion under Pope Francis to go with more modest quarters than this. But right on the side of it is this alley that was still paved of wood for years. Now, the wood that they have here now, this is not original wood. These are newer blocks that they put in. It was originally 1909. It was creosote and cedar, like the ones that were found underneath Bank Street just lately. These ones were restored in 2011 with black locust. At one time, there were about 50 miles of wooden alleys in Chicago, about around the time of the Great Chicago Fire, when we found a good reason not to have wooden ones. A couple others still survive. There's an alley on Roscoe near the lake, I know, that still has wooden blocks. But if we proceed straight down the alley and make our way back to Lakeshore Drive, the most prominent mansion up on the North Lakeshore Drive area is this one that currently serves as the Museum of Surgical Sciences. Was originally a mansion built for Mr. F.D. Countess and his new wife, Eleanor Robinson, based on like a chateau near in France where Marie Antoinette used as like a summer house. But Eleanor came home from college one summer, found that her older sister was engaged to this older guy named F.D. Countess, but apparently fell in love with the guy herself, and eventually that guy switched from being engaged to her sister to being engaged to her, and built her this mansion on Lakeshore Drive. But she was an adventurous woman, and I mean that in more of a modern sense. At the time, that would have implied untoward things. But she joined every committee. She got involved in the war effort during World War I. She was decorated by the Queen of Belgium. Went on things like bear hunts, which she didn't think were all that much fun. She said here, there's more thrills in a rubber of bridge than in the bear hunt. But eventually this just got to be too much for her husband. He couldn't keep up with her. They amicably divorced in the early 1920s. He moved out and moved into the Drake Hotel for 2 years so she could divorce him for abandonment. Even though it wasn't really. They got along fairly well. But it was difficult to get a divorce in those days. So she remarried a little while after, continued living in the house. She got the house, and now it is the Museum of Surgical Sciences, where they have things like trepanned skulls that had holes drilled into them for fun and profit. They've got Napoleon's death mask in there. Shown here with my Imperial Commander action figure. I used to have this whole thing where I would... the old Imperial Commander figure from 1980 has this hangdog expression that makes him for great portraits. So I used to take him all over the country, but posing him in places. The Museum of Surgical Sciences had a lot of great ideas for places to pose that guy. When I got a picture of him with Mark Hamill, I figured I'd probably taken this about as far as I can go. Let's move around over to Burton, around the corner from here. We'll just touch very briefly on 40 East Burton. This was a house designed for lawyer John Shortall, later the Midwest headquarters of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese. But this was designed by Richard Schmidt, who in Chicago is probably best known now for the Wrigley Mansion and around here for the Schoenhofen Pyramid at Graceland Cemetery. And also a much more modest gravestone in Graceland for his father Ernest Schmidt, who was the most respected radical in Chicago in the 19th century. And just across the street from that, another one that I just love. I love that this one is still standing. This one is the old Patterson McCormick Mansion, designed by Stanford White of the McKim Mead and White. Total jerk. The plaque outside of it says that it was designed for Sissy Patterson, but really she was only about 9 years old at the time this place was built. She lived here as a little kid up to the time of her social debut, though frankly designing things for 9-year-old girls is exactly the kind of thing that old Stanford White would have done. Now, Sissy herself was the granddaughter of Joseph Medill, the editor of the Chicago Tribune. Later herself became editor of the Washington Herald Record. And she was once described by a magazine as perhaps the most powerful woman in the United States and the most hated. She ran a very gossipy newspaper. Many of the biographies written about her now, they call her the battling countess of Newspaper Row. She actually was married to a lout of a count for a while. And most of the biographies focus more on her many, many, many love affairs that she had over the years, her many, many love triangles, some of which we get into a little bit more detail about in the when we do the After Hours tour. But eventually in the 1940s and 50s through the 70s, this house became a place called the Bateman School. A friend of mine who went there in the 50s said it was a school for the worst kids in the city. One of the teachers there, fairly famously, and one of his teachers, was a woman named Virginia McManus, who later wrote a book about how she was making extra money while working as a teacher at the Bateman School. You can probably guess about where that was going. 1965, the place nearly burned down after a couple of students decided that they didn't want to take a test, so the two of them started a fire. They thought they would just set off the sprinkler system, ended up starting a whole big fire. Now today, of course, it has been redivided into condos. There's actually a bit of a video footage from the real estate office showing what the inside of the place is like now. We'll just watch this for a second. Billy Corken owned a place in here for a while. There was one room called the Mirror Room, which is the earliest reference I know of to kids at a school doing Bloody Mary in the mirror. Now, other people who went to the Bateman School have nicer things to say about it than my friend Pinkwater who did. And others say that, I also talked to one person after the last time I did this who emailed me and said, my husband went there after he got kicked out of a couple other schools, and he deserved it too. I didn't ask for more details. Now, just down the road from this, down Astor Street, a little north of where we were on Astor before, is one of the lost mansions of the place. This empty space, this high-rise here is once the site of Louise de Koven-Bowen's mansion. This is a picture of her when she was young and used to steal gooseberries from Eli B. Williams until one day got the scoots from it and learned her lesson. As an older woman, she was a very wealthy woman who was involved in every social committee. She was deeply involved in Hull House. She worked with the Vice Commission. She published books about the cheap theaters and what it was really like to work for department stores in the city. Had a mansion right here. Now, in her book, Growing Up with the City, she describes that one day her father said, hey, there's a great new park in town. Why don't we go see it? It's called Lincoln Park. So they went there, but it had only recently been the Old City Cemetery. They were still in the process of moving everything, and she went through the park and thought, I am never going to come just hang out in this park. I mean, everywhere you looked, there were little bits of broken coffins, there were little bits of bones. The way she described it is like if the people had risen out from their graves and on their way up to Graceland and Rose Hill Cemetery to be reburied, they dropped little bits of their anatomy as they went. And the entrance to that cemetery wouldn't have been just Lincoln Park now. It extended well into the Gold Coast. If you remember the Richard Driehaus owned place on Schiller a while back, that would have been about the entrance to the cemetery. We're well within the boundaries of it, where Louise's mansion eventually was, and she even said that several of the maids would not go down to the basement because they knew that when they had dug out the basement, they found dead bodies. And now they believed that it was haunted. It would be a great ghost tour stop if it was still there. Move just quickly to show a couple of other places here. Here at 1441 is another Lars Hallberg joint. But one of my favorites in the whole place is at 1528 North State. 1528 North State. So with all of these cool details on it. Very cool Gothic style. Bit of a Dutch influence with a steeply pitched roof. And all these things that look like sea monsters on it. There was really no way I could get a really good picture of it that showed all of the detail in one shot. You can see up here, like up above the door, there's this thing that looks like a sea monster coming out. The patina over the copper and the bronze is looking terrific now. But this was the home of a surgeon by the name of William Hazlitt, who was a big game hunter and explorer himself. Now, in 1925, one of the biggest news stories of the year was an explorer named Floyd Collins got stuck in Crystal Caves. This is examining some bones in Crystal Caves. He was not the first person to get stuck in there, honestly. And this became a massive media story. People gathered around the Crystal Cave where they couldn't quite reach him and couldn't quite rescue Floyd Collins. So even people were even showing up to sell hamburgers and stuff. It was not unlike that Simpsons episode where Bart pretends he's fallen down a well. Now, there's even actually some film footage of this. Now, when the idea was that maybe all they had to do was amputate his leg and get him out from under the boulder that was trapping him inside of the place. So Anita Blaine McCormick paid for Dr. Hazlitt, who lived in that house, to go out to the Crystal Caves and see what he could do. And everybody was pitching in, trying to get access to him, trying to get close enough to him that they could rescue him. Nobody could quite get down there safely. But there's Floyd Collins himself, and on the right, Dr. Hazlitt, who lived in the house over here. Now, eventually he was unsuccessful. He wasn't able to get close enough to amputate the leg, and eventually he was found dead after 17 days. Now, here's an interesting thing. The Daily Tribune, right beneath it, to the left of the political cartoon, they're talking about W.E. Stokes, who comes up on tours here now and then. He was the guy who built the Ansonia Hotel in New York, which we've been to on a couple of the time travel pub crawls. But then he came to Chicago when he was trying to divorce his wife. He was trying to prove that his wife had originally been a butterfly, one of the workers at the Everleigh Club. Everything gets kind of tied together in the press sometimes. It's fascinating when you look up these old articles and find something from some whole other article you've looked at. But Collins had become such a big tourist attraction that when they finally did access his body, they just left the coffin where it was, and even had a window on it, so after he was embalmed, you could look right in and see his dead body. He continued to be a tourist attraction long after his death. Now, and today the place, once again, like a lot of these places, has been up for sale. It's been rehabbed, and once again, from the real estate company, we've got a little bit of footage of the inside of this place. Still featuring lots of vintage touches. Yeah, I don't know if I'd want to wind up as a tourist attraction, but it's probably inevitable, right? I know I'm going to be on the ghost tour eventually, so there'll be a place by like the Dave Matthews Band Poop Bridge that'll knock my head off one day. The tour will start, so our old tour guide was an idiot. And right here on the Dave Matthews Band Poop Bridge. Gorgeous place and hasn't really been modernized that much. I would probably modernize the furnishings a bit more myself. I want to keep every vintage detail, but, you know, try to make it more my style. Nice bathrooms, too. They'll bury me in my frozen pants, that's right. But alright, everybody, now before I start really plugging the upcoming tours, I know this is kind of a shorter one today, I want to just thank everybody who sent nice, kind words about Charlotte and show a couple of quick clips of Charlotte. Here's Charlotte battling Mirror Cat. Actually, here what she's doing is almost doing like a duck soup routine, trying to trick that cat in the mirror. But she'd been fighting with Mirror Cat ever since she was a little kitten. And, of course, trying to get into the liquor cabinet. And playing with fidget spinners. She liked the fidget spinner better than I did. And she loved the presents that you guys sent as well. A few people have sent out presents to Miles and Charlotte, and she loved getting those. So thanks a lot, everybody, for that. Let me quick plug the upcoming tours. There won't be one on Thursday night, because I'll be on the road. We're off seeing Lenora, but there will be one that Thursday morning that I promise you is going to be epic. Also, we'll have a great Find a Grave Friday. Morning tours will be continuing. A week from the day, June 7th, we will be doing Gangsters of Chicago once again. Haven't done that one since clear back in February. Always new stuff to add to that as well. Now, as most of you know, yesterday I took a day off for the first time since the pandemic got started, but I just don't really do time off very well, so I worked on a couple of the posts for the Patreon that'll be upcoming, and also worked on some stuff for the Cafe Press. If you should need a Mysterious Chicago sweatshirt, hoodie, etc., cafepress.com/Mysterious Chicago has what you need, including some new Dead Ringer Quartet shirts. Those of you who come on our time travel pub crawls are familiar with the Dead Ringers, the most dangerous barbershop quartet in the business. And while I was at it, I did this other one. I've been planning this for a while, a new shirt with some of my favorite headlines from old Chicago newspapers. Dillinger's brain now resting in pieces. Smut! Fiendish! So some of these full articles are going to be posted tomorrow on the Patreon as well, but all of this is right over at cafepress.com/Mysterious Chicago. So once again, everybody, thanks a lot for joining me. I am going to put Earl Father Hines back on, and we will just hang out like we always do. So thanks a lot for joining me. Thanks for all of the kind words about Charlotte over the last couple of days. That really has meant a lot. So thanks for joining me, everybody. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tours, and here is Earl Father Hines.
Every blade of grass where I roam, whisper as I pass, hurry home. Hand in hand, we'll stand beneath the moon and bid the
Thanks, Kirk. I think the one with the headlines is going to look especially good on a tote bag. What was the asking price of the mansion? I forgot. More than I got, I know that. But how big was the original city cemetery? I couldn't really give you a thing in acres. I'm really bad about measuring distance in acres. But it started on Schiller and extended a few blocks past North Avenue. Yvette, I've been working on a Dillinger tour for a while. It's kind of been on the back burner, but it's slowly being put together. Thank you, Chuck and Lisa and Ann. Thanks, Marita. And you will notice we are back on Venmo now. Oh, this is the older thanks thing. Let me switch that out. Let's see. There we go. Ooh, updating a unit in the Ansonia to sell. That would be awesome. Betsy, the new designs are on Cafe Press right now. They should be anyway. Cafe Press can get a little bit wonky. They look like they were there this morning. Now, thank you guys have been so nice to Charlotte and Miles. Serena, we're still working on that kind of stuff. Whether we'll be able to do hybrid or in-person or what. We'll experiment with all kinds of stuff, I'm sure. Just waiting for... Usually I used to do tours. Mysterious Chicago would be partnered up with Atlas Obscura or somebody. But now they're... I don't know what's going on with them anymore. I'm trying to just do stuff on my own. But that requires me to get a new business license. It's been held up in paperwork for a while. Oh yeah, this would be a great, the shirt, like anything you put this on, it's going to be a fun conversation piece. Just look at some of these headlines. You can all go thirsty is Capone's goodbye. Dillinger's brain now resting in pieces. Just one thing is sure, outlaw is still dead. Smut from the Minnie Williams case. Fiendish and Dastard are about H.H. Holmes. O'Banion gang like pirates of olden days. That one about live roosters with musical instruments. That had for Clark Cole and Middleton's Dime Museum. Chicago newsboys, they are hard and depraved, but rough, but bright and brainy. And Levy is dead, but its idol, jazz, reigns. Viola Larson, girl steals rig to write about it. James, I hope so. But hopefully we should have things back up and running pretty quick. If not, I think within a couple of weeks I'll probably just do one like on a pay what you wish tour that I can maybe get around some of the laws. That was Jewish Graceland. Just south of Graceland and Wonders cemeteries. Yes, there is also a puzzle of the headlines piece. Reaper Medic on YouTube. Yeah, that sounds really cool. If you can send me an email or something, the firehouses would be especially cool. Thanks, Al. Have a good weekend. Carol, it was called the Gold Coast because it was fancy, and it is also on the coast. Is there a particular hotel in the city that would be considered the most haunted? Probably the Congress. If that place ain't haunted, no place is haunted. And you gotta be careful with it, because as soon as it became famously haunted, people started making up stories about it left and right. Well, walking around isn't the hard part, it's just selling tickets legally is the tricky part. Thanks, Iris. Jerry, yeah, there should be long sleeve shirts up there. Thanks, Linda. Do I know which suite number the parents of Bobby Franks lived in at the Drake? Off the top of my head, I do not. I might have that in my files someplace. But also, it's all been renumbered in there, so trying to figure that out exactly could be a real trick. Not impossible, but a real trick. Mary, how do I know Mahaley's grave? I know them through Georgia. They're the guy who used to play guitar in my old bands played for them. And he and James came along with me on a cemetery mixtape trip in Savannah. Joanne, yeah, I'll be doing a tour tomorrow. Yvette, I've never stayed at the Congress Hotel. I live in Chicago. I don't really stay in the hotels. But I used to take ghost tour groups out there all the time. It comes up on my virtual ghost tours quite a bit. Nothing I would swear up and down in front of a panel of scientists was a dead guy, but some weird stuff. Thanks, Georgie. Yes, tomorrow is Memorial Day, so I want to try to find something appropriate for that, but it is also Mural Monday. I got some ideas. Thanks, Donna. And again, if you like these headlines, tomorrow on the Patreon... Where'd that button go? On the Patreon, tomorrow morning I'm going to post some of those actual articles. Thank you, Arlene. Oh, happy birthday to Octavio's mom. I think I said that a couple of days ago, though. The Cass Hotel. I don't know much about the Cass Hotel off the top of my head. Now, when people ask me for hotel recommendations, it's hard for me to do. I don't really stay in them. I'm trying to think which one is the Cass Hotel. Thanks, Joanne. And Mandy Crypt is on her way over here right now. Everybody wants to see Miles. Let me go get Miles. All right, here's the real star of the show. Marjorie, the pillow you can see in the background over there matches the curtains in the dining room exactly, but I had it in the dining room and nobody was sitting on it. So I moved it in here and Miles took up residence on it immediately. Miles I just got him up from sleeping. But he was jumping all over me earlier. He's purring too. Miles has plenty of people coming over to play with him over the next week or so. Kieran, thanks for posting that. Thank you so much for the people who have donated to Pause in Charlotte's name. Tony, yes, Miles, we taught Miles early to let us trim his nails. He and Charlotte both always seem to enjoy it. Carol, I've had several cats over the course of my life. We lost another a couple of years ago. He was 18. He was a great cat, too. And the cats we had previously hated getting their nails trimmed. We'd have to, like, roll them up in a blanket like a burrito. But Miles, unless he's being rambunctious anyway, if I get him when he's nice and calm, it's a snap. That's great of you, Kristen. Molly, Ronnie's sad, of course, but she's doing all right. We knew it was the right thing to do. We could tell Charlotte was ready to go. The headline design on Cafe Press, I thought it was a mug. If it's not, I'll work on getting it onto one. In fact, I think I can probably do that right this second. I can do that pretty much with a touch of a button here. So I will add it to some more drinkware. Let's see.
But here's rhythm and jive, Earl Father Hines and the St. Louis Blues.
Actually, I think this would look pretty cool as a drinking glass. Once I get like a frosty beer mug, everything would turn sepia. If you refresh, I just added them. I don't know how long it'll take for them to show up. That wood block smells a lot like the city. It's cedar and creosote. And years of street smells. An artist tour would be a pretty good one. Sabrina, Miles knew something was up. He'd noticed Charlotte wasn't chasing him or playing with them, and I could tell he was confused. He was sad but coping. No, we were able to have someone come out to the house, and Miles was in the room the whole time. But in the last few weeks as she got sicker, he knew not to tackle her or try to chase her anymore. He just wanted me to pick up all of the slack. He's really wanted to play a lot lately. It's like I wasn't sure I would get the pub crawl done in time every time I sat down. Every time I sat down, I'll feel his claws on my back. All right, Miles. He's still a little sleepy right now, but he's still sitting on the chair next to me here. Now, James, I've worked with Jeff Mudgett several times. We always have a good time hanging out. We disagree historically we disagree. I don't know what his politics are much. So I shouldn't say one way or the other there. Rose, I can't remember what the name of that wife was. I'm not really a Hemingway expert. I was an English major, but I didn't do much Hemingway. And the first time I did this tour, I didn't really include the Hemingway house, but then so many people asked about it afterwards that I threw it in. Miles, you hear that? There's a cat named Patches who has a crush on you. Any real haunted theaters? Well, it's hard to say what's real and what's not, but there's hardly a theater that doesn't have a ghost story. And partly that's because if you ask a theater person to tell you a ghost story, they'll do it. But I did get to investigate the old Oriental Theater, now the Nederlander, which is built where the old Iroquois Theater was, and that does get kind of spooky. I did hear some interesting stuff.
Give our faithful seat a slap and carry on in jive.
Hemingway lived there early 20s, like 2021. Nederlander, thanks. James, I've had paperwork that says H.H. Holmes was in Chicago during the Ripper murders for years. So it's never been a theory I took that seriously to start with. I could go on, but we're in public. So. Thanks, Eleanor.
And have a little Father Hines melody of the Colorado sunset. Jive.
I understand some of the women's t-shirts to the original logo aren't coming up, so I'm trying to re-add those. I thought they should all be there. Molly, I saw my first Bob Dylan concert at the Fox Theater in Georgia. I don't have a plan to go there right now. Thanks, Laura. Oh, hang on, everybody. Mandy Crypt is here.
we turn on now to the next tune. Earl Father Hines gives us a bit of jive under the general heading of So Help Me.
Look who it is, everybody. It's Mandy Crypt and her fiance Ben are here to play with Miles. You know Mandy from effing Chicago.
Hi, guys. Hello. Hi, Miles. Come here.
Miles loves strangers. He loves new people. He's met Mandy before, but it was before the pandemic.
You got so big. I remember when he was like this little. He's like, fuck you. My cat person's here.
Yeah, everybody's saying hi. But all right, everybody, I think that should be my cue to be a good host and take off for the day. Thanks again for joining me. Thank you so much for all of the kind words these last few days. Quick, one more plug for the upcoming tours. So there won't be a tour Thursday night like there usually is, but there's going to be a big one that morning. Then Sunday, a week from today, we are bringing back Gangsters of Chicago. Morning mini tours every day at 10 o'clock, including Mural Monday and Find a Grave Friday. There's going to be a really interesting Find a Grave Friday coming up, too. And Fridays at 6:30 on the Patty Vasquez Show Facebook page is Whiskey and a Cookie, in which we drink whiskey, eat cookies, and discuss the events of the week. So everybody, thanks a lot for joining me. I'm Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago. Stay safe, stay strong, stay warm.